So our next topic is, what are NFL teams going to do? Are they going to rest a lot of players in the upcoming Week 17? And I think this all boils down to where these teams are in the season. There's certain
Sure.
teams that just haven't looked good recently and probably are going to sit guys. And a lot of everybody's pointing to Pittsburgh, right? They lost 3 in a row. They almost lost this past week to the Colts. So you're looking at Pittsburgh and Coach Tomlin and a few other players already came out and said, we didn't really have a bye week because they had a bunch of games moved around because of COVID. And they didn't really have a full bye week where they knew they were going to be off that entire week. So they haven't had rest at all this season. So I think that's a team that's definitely going to rest a lot of its players. I know Tomlin already mentioned that he's going to rest Roethlisberger for sure. I would imagine some of the receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster, will probably get some time off as well. Even though they can still fight for that. They're the second seed right now. The Bills can gain that second seed if Pittsburgh loses and the Bills win. But I think for Pittsburgh in particular, they're definitely going to rest some players this week because it's just been a tough month for them as far as rest is concerned. I think they need it the most. But who's another team, Brendan, that you think is probably going to rest some players this week in the NFL?
That's a tough call. I mean, I think you might see Kansas City maybe rest a few players. That wouldn't shock me. I mean, they have the first round bye locked up. They have home field advantage locked up. So it really wouldn't shock me to see Andy Reid go ahead and sit down Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, some players like that could maybe need a little bit of additional rest going into the playoffs and can be still as explosive. But that's one of those things where I think as a coach, it's pick your poison, to be honest, because you can rest these players and they can get that additional rest and be feeling good physically going into the playoffs, but they also might be maybe a little bit out of tune with each other and as far as playing the game. And I know people might think that's crazy, but when you've been playing this game for so long and so many weeks in a row, you just really start to get into a zone and you can get out of that zone fairly quick. And so the rust could develop, and you can see that a lot of times with teams that have had that bye coming into the first half of the game, after the bye, having a little rust and not playing so good. So it's really, a balance of really what you want to do. But I think you hit it on the head there with certain teams and certain situations. I think we'll go ahead and get that rest and value that rest. I think Pittsburgh, they've had a couple of down games here recently. I think Juju Smith-Schuster dancing on the logo didn't help him any. Took that big hit in the game, and obviously they lost the game. But I think, the Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin have his team ready to go in the playoffs. Mike Tomlin's a great coach. Ben Roethlisberger's been playing at a high level this year. Their defense has been playing good. I expect Pittsburgh to bounce back. Watt is just an animal on that defense. So, I think they're, another team that could do okay with resting their players and still be fine. But look for them to rest a few players. Look for Kansas City to rest a few players. But I think there's also a few other teams that just cannot because they're right on the bubble there. And they need a win going into Week 17 to be able to make the playoffs. So it really just depends on where you are as far as standings.
Yeah, no question. I think if you look at a team like the Bills, who have started to sort of accelerate towards the end of the year, they're also a little younger. So, Coach McDermott might want to just continue to keep his foot on the gas pedal and let this team ride it out and see if they're one of those teams that oftentimes we've seen. I mean, I remember the Giants when they beat the Pats twice in the Super Bowl. They were a wild card team, and they were playing well at the end of the year, and they just carried that through the postseason. So,
momentum.
Yeah, exactly. And then we saw some of those Colts teams in the mid-2000s who, were the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed. They got the bye, and then they didn't play in Week 17. They had 2 weeks off, and they looked rusty in the first half against some teams and ended up losing some playoff games as well. So interesting kind of outlooks on it. In the NFC, nothing's really totally locked up. I mean, the playoff teams, for the most part, are pretty much there. There's a couple that might get in. But the seeding could change drastically with what happens in Week 17. So you could see every team in the NFC play a bunch of guys. I think, the Saints probably will rest some guys, I would imagine. I don't think Drew Brees would play, but at the same time, he hasn't played that much in the second half of the season. So you could see a lot of different things in the NFC, whereas I think the AFC is a little bit more defined, in who's going to rest and who isn't. So it's going to be interesting.